Hi, this is Andy from FlipPop, and today I'm bringing you a very special project. I am a teacher, and when I saw this in Facebook Marketplace, I had to get it. I contacted the seller, and I drove at night to buy it. Here it is, an old school desk. I used to sit in one of these in the 70s when I attended a public school. I can imagine the dreams of those boys and girls who sat here to study. The conversations with their friends, their endless days of boring classes, their happiness, frustrations and anger, maybe their first laugh. I would like to give it back to a grown-up man or woman. I'll transform it into a fancy modern grown-up desk. The first thing I'll try is to strip the finish. It looks like a thick layer of white latex. I'm using a popular stripping product here in Chile. This thing is thick, yellow, and disgusting. It smells awful, but it works like magic. Always wear gloves and use these chemical products outside or in a well-ventilated room. At first I thought, oh, it has another layer of red paint underneath. I'll have to strip it again. And no. After cleaning it with a bit of warm water, I realized it was a red laminated top. It was a sort of melamine or formica. I'll have to buy a heat gun to try to remove it. Going to the hardware store, I found these plywood pallets. They were thrown to the garbage. They would be perfect to build a drawer. Plywood is quite expensive these days, and here they throw it away. Well, you know, your trash is someone else's treasure. This shot is from the following month. I did not film because I was really busy with all the end of the year stuff. I was in charge of putting up 2 musicals, apart from all the usual end of year tests, corrections, planning, meetings, etc. So I was too tired most of the time. But what you can see here is that the heat gun did not work, and after sanding hours I could get rid of some of the red plastic top. Then I started removing the bottom part. It was a simple piece of hardwood. It was mostly stuck due to the thick coat of white paint, but with the help of my hammer and my putty knife, I removed it. It had been stapled. You can see bits of blue, so probably it had been originally painted blue with that red laminate top. Poor kids, who can concentrate with those horrendous colors. I started sanding with 80 grit sandpaper with my palm sander. Instead of Stanley, the brand should be Scandal. How noisy it is! I asked my neighbors above and below if it was too noisy, and they said it was, so I promised not to use it a lot. It's a good sander, and you can use normal sandpaper, which is cheaper than Velcro pads, but God, it's noisy. One corner of the top had opened, so I glued it. And clamped it. I removed the extra glue with a humid cloth. You have to do it. Sanding glue is definitely difficult. I decided to tape these holes at the back of the desk in order to apply wood filler. I love pushing wood filler into the holes so as to have consistency. I let that dry. I then stripped the whole desk and chair. I did not film it because I did it when I arrived home in the evenings. That was to avoid using the sander at that time of the day. Then a week later, I started with the addition of legs to both the desk and the chair. As you can see, I picked up some leftovers from a nearby construction. These are pine wood 2x2s. I wanted to add 7 centimeters, that's approximately 3 inches, to the desk, and 6 centimeters, approximately 2.5 inches, to the chair. I started cutting the new feet with my jigsaw, but I didn't get perfect cuts. It is still very difficult for me to use it with precision. It works well for me in plywood, not in sticks. Then my miter cutter. I wish I had these big tools, but someday. It still proved to be excellent. Perfect square angles. Then the rest was easy peasy. Drilling the new feet, adding glue and dowels. And here's Frankenstein. In my head, I had the idea of chiseling down the feet. Something easy, but it was difficult. I kept on cutting more than I should, and everything was so irregular. Then I decided to go on with the scandal. 40 grit sandpaper. I sanded away the legs and made them perfect. Of course, I had to tell my neighbors and I had to rush. I did it in 2 consecutive Saturdays. To fill the gaps, I used magic putty. We don't get Mondo in Chile. I had used it long time ago and I forgot how stinky it was. This was on a Saturday night and it was November. I did not wear any protection and had a sore throat until the following day. Next Saturday it was time to sand the magic putty away. As you can see, I put it over the previous wood filler because I hadn't liked it. Now it was perfectly smooth. Now I used my DeWalt orbital sander. It is noisy, but not that much. I used, I believe, 100 grit sandpaper. The transition between the legs and the new feet was glorious, so smooth. Now it was time to start making the drawer. I installed the rails to get wood measurements. Why rails? Well, I want the drawer to run smooth, to have a touch of sophistication. After removing the pallet's feet, I don't know if they're called like that, I had the plywood surface to cut the base for the drawer. When you cut against the grain of the wood, it is a good idea to tape the border not to have loose fibers. This veneer is called tawari or tabebuia. It's wood from the Amazon forest and it is supposed to be elegant. It's a sort of wild oak. My idea is to apply it to the top of the desk, to the front of the drawer, and to the top of the chair. This is my first time with veneer, so I'll follow what I've watched on YouTube. I'll roll glue on the back of the veneer and then on the top of the desk. They say you have to wait until it's dry and then iron it. I don't have much time because I have a mountain of tests to correct, so I'll see if I can apply pressure to it. I'll check it tomorrow. The following day, I removed the weights and found bubbles. However, ironing is like magic. It's early and I want to use my orbital sander with 120 grit. I had already hand sanded it and I wanted to speed things up. That was an awful mistake. You must always be patient. Look at all those fibers. It was Friday evening and I thought, well, if I apply some wood glue with sawdust, I can fix it. I have done it before, so I applied it generously. And it was awful. I had to remove everything. Thank goodness it was a Saturday and I had time to do it. I removed the veneer, sanded the top, and reapplied the veneer with patience. This time I cut the borders from below using a piece of plywood. I applied some sawdust and glue, but in very little amounts, mainly to cover natural veneer cracks. While it dried, I disassembled the second pallet and took the wood to make the sides of the drawer. I used the scandal sander to make everything even. Then started assembling the drawer with self-tapping screws. I did not care about unevenness, because I would eventually sand everything flush. I applied silicone and wood filler to all the imperfections of the drawer. This time, I hand sanded with patience, with 120 grit and with downward movements. Just some final touch-ups with glue, and the light sanding with 240 grit to get rid of the glue and having a smooth surface. When everything was smooth and clean, it was time for staining. I chose Veretain oil-based stain in Colonial Maple. It is based on soy oil and it is supposed to nourish wood. I applied it with a foam brush, let it rest for some seconds, and then removed it with some paper towel. I loved the color. With a crayon, I touched up the bits of glue that were visible and applied a second coat after 3 hours. Then went to adjust the rails for the bottom of the drawers. Some days later, I lightly sanded the top and cleaned it before applying lacquer. I'm going to wipe it using the cotton ball technique. You take a bit of cotton and then rub it against a rugged surface. As you see, the fibers of the cotton ball begin to close. You repeat this many times until you get a compact ball. This time I'm going to use normal lacquer, not shellac. This is the amber lacquer all furniture makers used. It gives furniture a sheen and a finish that is shinier than satin, but less shiny than gloss, and it looks so elegant. You dilute it with thinner until you have a cloudy and oily solution. Then you apply it with the cotton ball following the grain. I also applied the veneer to the front of the drawer, with patience and following all the necessary steps. After sanding and before lacquering, I measured the hardware that I bought from Aliexpress and decided to drill the holes before applying lacquer. Now my last torture started. This was in December, just a couple of days after accepting a job offer at a new school and quitting my current job. This was holidays for me and I wanted to paint using a paint sprayer I had bought from eBay. I had seen reviews about it and loved it for the price and the capacity. So I took it outside and practiced with a piece of cardboard. At first, I thought it was the water I added to the paint because it didn't cover much. Then I painted the bottom of the desk with a brush. It looks blue. It does not cover much. Maybe with a second coat. Then I proceeded to lacquer the top of the chair. What is going on with this paint? The following day, I covered the tops of the chair, the desk, and the front of the drawer. I spray painted everything with multiple coats and it started to become black. I took the chair inside because I wanted to sand and paint and I didn't have any space outside. I sanded with 400 grit paper. I didn't have any more paint and I had to go and buy some more, but before, I sanded the desk and used the remaining paint on the bottom of the chair. And oh my god, the guy at the hardware store told me that my paint must have gone bad. That probably the pigments had hardened at the bottom of the can. I had bought it in August thinking I wouldn't take this long, and he recommended the same brand but in satin finish. This is Canon Black, and I decided to hand paint it. So I bought this Condor brush. I love it. I could see immediately that it was not blue and the consistency was delicious. Painting was never this easy before. If you have been watching until here, consider liking and subscribing. I also have some ways in which you can support this channel in the description below. You can make this channel grow, and your support will make the difference. I protected the paint with 3 coats of water-based polyurethane. When the paint was dry, taking off the masking tape was easy, but you always get those bits where it gets stuck. Then with a knife I took off all those tiny excesses that had dripped onto the lacquer. I would later retouch any imperfection with an artist brush. I then applied some vinyl transparent tiles to the bottom of the drawer, and then my phone ran out of storage and didn't film that. Anyway. Finally, I wet sanded the lacquer parts to have the smoothest surface and then applied car polish paste and polished until extremely shiny. Finally, it was time to install the hardware. Before looking at the big reveal, let's remember the way it looked. Just a normal school desk. And here it is now. I love the way it looks. It is perfect for small spaces. The boy or girl who studied in it then can now work at it. Please tell me in the comments what were the things you liked the most of this project, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll be posting new content every week. Thanks for watching!